So Flask, before that, it is a framework. We know it. So framework, what is framework? Framework is a collection of modules or libraries that helps us to write code for developing web applications. So it is a collection of different modules together to help us to write code for building or developing a web application. So it is a fully developed package that makes the web development process easier, faster, scalable, reliable, and flexible. So Flask is one of the Python framework that help us to build a web application. What is the difference between Flask and Django? Django is another framework. Both are the most popular frameworks written in Python programming language. They are considered to be one of the popular web application web development frameworks that help us to develop web applications. I think you know PHP or any Java framework like Spring, PHP frameworks like Laravel. So these frameworks are important to build web applications. So, but they are not Python based. They are PHP or Java based frameworks. They are written on top of Java programming or Python, PHP programming. But Flask and Django are written on top of Python programming. So they are completely built using Python programming language. That's why they are Python based frameworks to build or develop web applications. So the key features of Django, let's see what are the features. Yeah, they are common actually. So what are the key features of Django? Django is very fast. So the working process of Django is extremely fast as compared to Flask. Versatile, adaptable, and scalable. So it has better features when compared to Flask frameworks, but Flask also has its own features. Django is secure. Security is guaranteed. So it is powerful authentication systems is also supported, and protocols to avoid like cyber attacks, unauthorized access of pages or texts or databases. The other is our focus is Flask. So what is Flask? What are the key features of Flask? Flask is a lightweight microwave framework. Why it is a lightweight micro framework? It doesn't support or require any particular tools or libraries, and it is also independent of any external libraries. But Django is already fully it supports any libraries, or it is fully functional. It has its own MVC models. So, but Flask does not support any particular tools or external libraries. It is also independent. It comes with a built-in server and debugger. It has its own built-in servers and debuggers, like WSGI web server gateway interface. And the other integrated unit testing is already enabled in Flask, and it enables faster while debugging the errors or any bugs, and it is robust development and freedom to experiment. The other is secure cookies. It is an attribute of HTTP requests that enables security channels and ensure no unauthorized person has access to the text or pages. So it has its own security cookies. So no one can access or the unauthorized pages or texts. It supports Unicode characters. It is simple and adaptable configuration. You can simply configure the Flask. The other most important features of Flask is compatible. It is compatible to the latest technologies like data science, machine learning, AI, cloud, or etc. So most of data scientists are using Flask to test, to publish their own machine learning models, AI products, or any data science analysis. So it is compatible. The other important features of Flask, why I choose Flask, is flexible and scalable. It supports WSGI server templates that allow us flexible and scalability for developing web applications. So those are important key features of Flask. That's why I choose Flask. My intention is just focusing on machine learning, AI, and data science. So that's why I choose these frameworks to develop a simple web applications. What are the difference between Flask and Django? Django is an open source. Both are open source actually, but Django is MVC, or I think model view controller. So it is built, or the design structure approach is MVT, or model view templates. So already built on top of these frameworks. So you don't need to create any model view controller or templates. Already supports these approaches, the structural approaches. But Flask, it doesn't support these model view templates or MVC. So you need to create your own MVC. So that is flexible. But in Django, you cannot modify or change the modules or the model view templates. So Flask is a small, scalable system without any specific set of instruments or outside libraries, because it is independent of any external libraries or specific tools. So it doesn't support, it doesn't require. So it doesn't support MVC or MVT. So you can create your own structures or structural design. You can follow your own structural design from the scratch because of it is flexible. And the, Django supports the most popular relational database systems like MySQL, Oracle, etc. But Flask does not support the basic database management like MySQL, Oracle, or what. But we need another library or tool to leverage the database systems to connect with database systems, relational database systems like SQL Alchemy. SQL Alchemy is the most popular tool to connect Flask with a database management systems for retrieving, storing data, or anything we want to do. And Django is less flexible as compared with Flask. It is because of its inbuilt tools or libraries. Developers cannot make any changes to the modules because of that is the flexibility issue. Or the MVC or MVTP is already built on Django frameworks, so you can't change or modify the modules. But Flask is a micro-based frameworks. Why it is micro-based frameworks? Because of it doesn't require any external tools or libraries. So with extensive libraries, making itself a flexible framework for developers. So every developer can develop their own structural models, or they can build the modules or libraries, and they can import they can connect with other libraries. Django is inspired by Ninja templates, but has its built-in model view template that makes the development process easier. So the developers don't need to design MVC models, already build these architectures. So the developers easily develop the web applications using Django without any difficulties, because of the it also has the admin panel, which means already the permission or security is easier, so everyone can easily assign permission for the users, and you don't need to develop the admin panel or admin controls. So by it also supports this admin page. Flask, it uses Ninja template design, but it has no any MVT or MVC templates. You can create your own model or design from the scratch. So those are the difference between Django and Flask. So the most important thing here is the flexibility. So if you wanted to develop from the scratch, you can use Flask. But if you don't want to develop from the scratch, you can use Django. So Django supports many features. So now let's get started. What are the requirements to start Flask? First, you need a text editor. Okay. Actually, I use Atom. Atom is the best editors. Actually, I recommend Visual Studio Code. That is best for editing code, for indentation, for it supports a lot of extensions, so you can use Visual Studio Code. But Atom is also best editors. So the first thing what you do is create a structures. The structures here, I created this folder. So you create a folder somewhere on your computer or desktop or any location. Now, once you create this folder, inside this, you need to create the structures. Flask, it doesn't support any MVC or any template. The first thing is you need to create a virtual environment. Virtual environment is important to isolate your projects, your libraries, and whatever. So Python, the most important features of Python is a virtual environment. So to separate different projects or isolatedly keep your project, so you can create a virtual environment on your project. Here, I have created a virtual environment actually. Then now let me show you how to install Flask library. Now let's change my working directory to desktop, and my folder is on desktop. So let's change to blog app. Here I have created nothing. So now let's create a virtual environment. To create a virtual environment, use Python -m option, then VAN environment, then virtual environment name like this. This one is the virtual environment name. This is the virtual environment keyword. Now to start this virtual environment, just source bin activate. Now the virtual environment is started. Then you can install the Flask on your virtual environment to store to keep all the libraries or projects in this virtual environment only. So we use pipe. The pip command is important to install Python libraries. Install Flask. Now the Flask module is installed in virtual environment, not on the whole computer system. It installed on virtual environment. It only is useful for this project only. So if you want to create another project, you can create another virtual environment and you can keep all the libraries in that virtual environment. Now I have installed the Flask, and now let's create a project. Here, the virtual environment is created. In this project, in this folder directory, let's create our new folder that is the models. Let's create our models. All the models, the classes will be stored in this models directory, and create templates. So because Flask doesn't support MVT, so we need to create our MVT, our structures, design structures. So, and also Flask support routers. We need to create routers. The views will be kept inside the routers. The templates or HTML files will be store or keep in the templates. So DOM, especially when you create templates, this is a common name. So if you create like rename template, the route or the Flask server doesn't recognize or know the template. So this is a case sensitive, so you need to correctly create this folder name. All the HTML files will be kept inside this templates folder. And outside this, we need to create app.python. This contains to run your Python or the Flask app. You need to create outside of the folders, but inside the blog app. And the Flask library is installed inside this virtual environment. So you can start virtual environment to run your application, because the Flask is not installed in the computer system, but installed in the virtual environment to separately keep all libraries that are important for our applications. Okay, now if there is no files here, we need to create in the routers, we create all the views files, Python files inside this. For example, let's for the first time, let's create index.py. Here, first, here we import Flask from Flask, import Flask, because Flask is already installed inside the virtual environments. So we need to create the app, here app Flask name. Just we need to register all the routers or views in the Flask app. Now with app dot with app dot context, or actually you don't need to the here with name main if this just run our app. The app actually the default server is localhost, so you can just call the host name. You can actually give your IP address of your computer or any other IP addresses, localhost, and port. The default port is 5000, but you can give your own port name here, 5, like this. This is if you wanted to run the Flask app, you can simply run this app inside the just Python app but it doesn't run any application because there is no I mean the index file or any other route file that's going to run on Flask application. So we need to create a route to route the HTML to render the HTML files on web browser. So okay, here in the routes, we have created index dots from app, import app, and from Flask, because this app is important to route, to register our routers in the Flask app. From Flask, we need to import render template. This is important to render our HTML templates from template files. Then we call app.route method. Then we can give the route name or the URL name that refers the HTML templates. For example, index. Then we define a class with the same name with the route name. And then return render template. Here we have no HTML files to render, so we need to create HTML files inside template index.html. Here you can create any HTML this is an HTML which is created inside the templates. All the HTML elements will be, files will be created inside these templates. the routers will render the HTML, HTML files, which means the view. When you think about the MVC, it is a view that views the HTML on a web browser that renders the templates, and the models will create our model classes, tables or classes. Here, here app.run. Now we need to register the index.py, the route inside the this app.py. When you call this from routers.index import all. So we need to import all the routers inside this app.py. When you run this, all the routers will be rendered the HTML files on web browsers. So now we have finished this Flask. Now let's run our application. Now just we call Python, then URLs must start with the leading slash. Okay, there is error inside. Okay, yeah. Here in the index, the URLs not index. If it is index, we just start. This is a URL list. The URL list is not built on Flask by default, so we need to build our URL list. So now the server is started. The server is started. You can start your web browser and run the application by calling the localhost and port name. Then open your web browser and call the address of the Flask app, that is the localhost, and including the port address 5500, and just display the hello welcome, because this hello welcome is found here. So this is HTML document which is found in the templates, and the routers will render the HTML documents through the address. The address will be registered to the Flask app using app.routes. App is imported from the app.py, because here we have declared, we have created the object Flask, and this Flask will run all the routers, because all the routers will be registered to the Flask app through the URL addresses here. So the render templates is the function from Flask that renders the HTML documents from templates. If all the addresses are registered, it will route the HTML to the Flask, and if the HTML document is found in the templates in that address, and it will render and display on the web browser through that addresses. So this is a simple way how to get started with Flask, and in the next time we will see how to create form using CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. So for today, thanks for joining.